Yes. So, hi, Makaye.
Hi, Sachin. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How was your New Year celebration?
Oh, well, it's just a normal day for me.
Well, okay. So, have you taken these resolutions, New Year resolutions?
Well, I think New Year's resolutions are quite important, as many people would be starting the year, to set out goals for themselves to achieve, you know. That's one thing that would be like a drive and also a pull, that force, making them to reach wherever they need to reach towards when the year ends.
Well, so yeah, what's your this year's New Year resolution?
Can you repeat again?
Now, what is your New Year resolution of 2022?
Uh, more life, more meaning, more purpose. Yeah,
Okay.
inspire people.
Yeah. So, do you know what's my resolution is?
If you could kindly share, I would really appreciate.
Actually, I wanted to do the things that actually frighten me. That actually makes me a lot of because I used to have lots of fears when I was a kid, and so I always wanted to go to the places. When I began to overcome my fears, what I really wanted to do is actually wanted to do the things that frighten me. So that's this year I have some of the list, some of the things that I wanted to do this year is actually to go beyond those fear barriers. Well,
Wow.
yeah. So, well, and I wish you a happy new year. I wish you a very wonderful new year for our audience. This year is going to be another, adventurous year. Of course, there are many things that actually uh, pulls us back as we go. Fear is one of the things, and that's why today we are going to discuss about fear and how to overcome them. So so I just would love to ask, what's your worst fear, Makai?
Would I?
What's your worst fear?
Oh, well, in this age whereby we're living now, it's always about trying to live beyond means of surviving, sustaining that, and to make a progress in life. So each and every time when you are a young man like me, you get to think about those things, how to maintain and how to sustain, how to reach your progress, to be progressive in life. That's, I think, it's one of the most important thing, because even people, the world, view you, dignify you according to those standards, as a man. But if your life has no progress, no direction, you are unstable, then it becomes a big problem, you know. Nobody wants to really associate with a person like that unless you have things that you are basketing in your bucket, putting together,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, yes, of course, we need a direction, especially in this year, in this modern times. If we don't have the direction, if we don't have that purpose, it's easier to be lost, and to be uh, to go into the other direction that we have that we never want to take. So in today's episode, actually, we are going to discuss about more about fear and how to overcome them.
right.
So, yeah, I just would love you to take me through this section so that would be really wonderful. So,
Sachin, you mentioned some of the few things in your childhood that you'd like to share with us today. and how you really overcame those fears. So could you take us through, and how did you really come about those fears as a person, as now we can see you?
Um, well, my worst fear, one of the worst fear was to uh, is to present myself in front of people. I was never good at it, and I could never do that because I always thought that I was not good enough to be presented in front of others, to be recognized by others. So that's one of the things that actually always, pushed me uh, away from social this society or social interactions. And I, although I wanted to be better, do better, I wanted to be among with my friends, wanted to have friends, this fear pulled me back. And the how I overcome those fears is actually when I left my home. I ran away from my home, because I wanted to, I wanted to find somewhere, some place, some safe place where I could lead a safe life. But in fact, I was when I ran away from home, instead of going to the safe place, I was actually going into the worst place that I had ever been. And it's where there actually where I began to socialize with people, mingle with people. So it's my experience now, mingling with the people, talking to them, talking to the strangers. It's those experiences that actually taught me that it's okay to be among with people. It's actually taught me it's okay to mingle with the society, because my fear pulled me back to have a nice conversation with my friends, to have a nice conversation with the strangers, to have a nice conversation with the people that I love to have a conversation or I love to touch. And when I experimented myself, I began to see different possibilities. Now, sometimes I sucked in having the right conversation. Sometimes I failed at it. Sometimes I really, I was really good at it. Sometimes I could, win over some conversations, and different these possibilities actually taught me that it's okay with socializing. And so that's that seeing that possibility, seeing that being as an expedi as an being experimented with life is something that actually helped me to learn more. And I could say that if you want to get rid of your fear, the first thing is have the courage to experiment with your life. Have the courage. Have the courage. There are certain things, there are lots of things that actually frighten you, but the first initial decision that you want to make is that you are willing to experiment with your life. Because if you see a group of people, and otherwise if you're invited to a special occasion and you don't want to go there because you're afraid, you still don't know that outcome. You still don't know what it's to be like with those people, because you've never been there. So why try experimenting? Why try going there? Why try having a conversation with them? Sometimes, of course, it may not be really successful, or maybe it's successful. Who knows? So why try experimenting with your life? So that's the first thing that I just would love to recommend.
Yeah, Sachin, you talking about something that made you withdraw socially from life. Take me through that experience that triggered you. Besides, yes, trigger fear is part of it, but what exactly was the condition behind you not being a sociable person?
Could you just elaborate that question?
I mean, you talked about that you were you had fears that pushed you away from being social. So now, what exactly was the conditions like that actually made you fear, being social?
Um, so the conditions. Okay. Um, could you just give me some examples? Like what?
Example, maybe
Yeah, I was.
environmentally,
It's because I was. I find it quite difficult to actually, mm, uh,
maybe like for
comprehend. Yeah.
environmentally, situation at home, at school. How was the situation like, the conditions basically that made you to withdraw and find you to build this shell for yourself within?
Yeah, the situation was, of course, there was always the situation.
Uh,
I grew up in, in a family that, where I did not get enough resources, the right environment to grow up. So, my friends used to call me a mistake, and actually, the fact that in the as far as I remember that. About my childhood, it was a very tough childhood. I didn't have anybody who believed in me, who supported me. I didn't have any people, who were with me back then, who would tell Sachin, you can do this. So there wasn't any people. And perhaps one of the reason is, I believe, is that people didn't know how to support a kid in my society. Now, why that is because almost everyone in my village was the same, so they were surviving. So there was most my parents, although were educated, they still had this very rough childhood. Didn't have any idea how to raise their children. So they were surviving. So there was lots of problems, like financial background. It was divorced when I was born, and so these things were some of the conditions that I was born into, and what some of the reasons why I developed these fears and anxieties. So I had this social phobia, which is kind of, I was always afraid to be socialize with people. But at a point, I realized that although I had these conditions, I need to break those conditions. Otherwise, I need to get away from it. So I asked, one thing that I asked myself was, what are the conditions that I could change? Is there any conditions that I could change? And what are the other conditions that I could not deal with, I could not change? So of course there were some few things that I wasn't able to cope up with, and there were a few other things that actually I could deal with. And so I began to write a list of things. Okay, so what are the things that I wanted to change? So of course, I couldn't change meeting people. I just somehow have to always meet with people, so it's necessary. I can't avoid a social interaction, right? Because you live in a social, you are a social being, and you live in a society, you live in a family, and so you always have to face these people, so you cannot escape from there. So so one thing that I asked myself was, okay, so is there anything that actually pulls me back from meeting those people or interacting with them? What are those things? So of course, I was afraid of being not recognized. I was afraid of being ridiculed. I was afraid of being humiliated. And I asked myself, how many of them were right? How many of those fears were right? And I had no idea, because of course there are few people who didn't really like me, or who behaved as if they didn't like me, but most of them didn't behave like that. Most of them were really nice. And then I asked myself, so if they were nice to me, why couldn't I be nice to them? Why couldn't I go to them and talk to them? Why couldn't I interact with them? So is there something else that I was having this problem? So, or is my misjudged or biased judgment preventing me from approaching them? And as I delve into deep myself, and I ask all these questions, I began to understand there are lot of things, lot of biased judgments within me that were causing me to have this fear, have this difficult situation with social interaction. So what I did is I began to do an experiment. I began to experiment with people, talk to people. What if I do? Sometimes I had to have this long conversation with myself in order to have a conversation with the person who was sitting next to me. So so it's a city in northeast India. So I was sitting on the bus, and a woman was sitting next to me, and I just wanted to have a chat with her, want to talk to her, want to know more about it. And so while I was sitting with her, I had this long conversation going on. Okay, so what would she think? How would I start the conversation? Where would I go? So I battled myself, and finally I decided to do one thing. Okay, let's start this conversation. But still, I felt that something was preventing me. Something was actually pulling me back whenever I wanted to say something. So that was this false belief. It was just like a glass barrier that was actually standing in front of me, and I always felt that this choking sensation, this a sensation where I could not even breathe. So what I did was I was sitting there, and then I immediately asked her a question, and then that sensation of that choking sensation, that uncomfortable situation, that just went away. That didn't exist anymore. And we went on. We had a nice chat. We had a nice conversation. I learned about her village, about how where she was, everything else. So that's one of the reasons why this experimentation is necessary, because some on our journey we might acquire a lot of different experiences. We acquire a lot of learnings and conditions, and sometimes healthy and sometimes unhealthy. So these unhealthy learnings, belief, experiences often becomes the filters which actually helps us to decide what to do, what not to do. So fear is often because fear is actually is some kind of a filter. It's like it will help you to to jump into a conclusion whether you want to go to that place or not to go that place, because if it is danger or not. So a kind of a different unhealthy experience. If you have an unhealthy experience with a specific place, a specific person, your what your brain says is, okay, so don't need to meet that person again. You don't need to have that same conversation with that person again. So you try to escape from that place or from that person. So if you keep doing that slowly becomes, that fear, anxiety becomes a habit, and it will control your life. and that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah. I'm thinking because there are certain words that you mentioned towards the beginning of our chat, explaining the conditions in which you grew up under. And you mentioned one of the other important things, that we are social beings. And part of socializing as a human being, you do need finances, And you mentioned that there was a struggle of less finances there and there, there and there, there and there. So, in your coming up, breaking through these barriers that makes you being fearful and able to socialize, how did you? What was your basic steps? I'm asking this because of maybe there could be a person at home who is facing a similar kind of situation. Maybe is looking towards the basic few humble steps of coming a step higher than he is at the moment. What could you say to those? Because things socializing also does need finances, and to be with people, you need finances.
Okay, yeah, that's a perfect question. Actually, of course, there were a few things that I actually took before I would jump into, or I would just go into a social interactions at first, because that was necessary for me to do. So one thing that before, for example, if you're a person who is really afraid to have a social interaction with people, the first thing that you could do is first read that environment that you are going to go, or that you go, that you're going to, or read the habitat. So most of us, when we retreat from a place of danger, we think either think it is danger because it is danger, or we think it is danger because we just think it's danger. You got it? So in some occasions, for example, just imagine, for example, you confront a snake, you confront a lion, you confront a bear, and that's a real dangerous situation. And because you know it, and you think it's a dangerous situation because your life is at stake now. You either have to run or just fight in order to save your life, right? That's a real dangerous situation. And the other one is, for example, imagine a public speaking, and you're afraid to, stand in front of people, stand in front of audience. And I did have these fears, the worst fears in my life. So in that case, is it just an imaginable fear, or is it a real danger? Is it a real danger of losing your life, losing your self-esteem, losing your your status? Is it in real danger of losing your money, losing your financial status, or your your physical status or mental status? Do you lose your image when you stand in front of an audience and say something, give a message? Do you lose that? Of course not. So the first thing is, read that environment, read if it is a real danger or not. So most of the times we miscalculate, we misjudge, we misinterpret the situation. So in order to do that, is the first thing that I advise people is to, first read, analyze the environment, understand the situation, right? And then take the next step, which is actually to experiment with it. So before that, of course, you have to practice. You have to know, what you're going to present in front of people, otherwise what you're going to talk, and you just have to go through a lot, the practice stuff, like just preparing yourself. So that's necessary, because if you're going to present a program in front of people, you need to have enough practice. If you don't have that practice, if you don't have that preparation, probably you're going to suck in it. You're going to fail at it. So you can do a little preparation before you meet certain people, or before you go to a certain social interactive such environment. So that preparation actually will help you to present yourself in a way that you want yourself to be presented. That's one. And once you have this preparation, then read the environment, understand the situation, and then experiment with it. Of course, there is always the one thing that you want to do is just that taking that first bold step to stand in front of people and to start that conversation. That's the bold step. And if you can do that bold step, if you can just cross that line, I think it could completely change your life. And if you are able to do it repeatedly, doing this preparation and reading the environment and taking the first bold step to be in front of people, to do that frightening thing that you have always afraid of. If you do that, I think you are on the way to greatness. You are on the way to opening up new possibilities, because always there are lots of possibilities. They exist. But it's beyond your fears. It's beyond your belief and fears that actually pulls you back. So you need to have that courage to go beyond. Take that bold step to be in front of that situation, or to start that conversation. Or it could be dancing, it could be presenting the one thing that you really love. So take that bold step and experiment it. And of course, when you do something, that, especially something that's really frightening, there are if it is something new that you're doing, there are two different outcomes. One is it may be something really good, positive, something negative. You may not be really applauded for it, not recognized for it, but still that bold step can help you to walk into that person that you really wanted to become.
Exactly. So what I'm happy about is that we have to see the environment, differentiate between life-threatening situations and things that are there to really challenge us to grow. Imaginary fears. That's how you put it. So I feel like for us, it's a must deal with our imaginary fears, because most of the time we are being crippled by them more than anything. As a result, we are unable to, reflect ourselves the way we should be, to our desired audience and our people that we should be socializing with them most of the time. And fear. It's quite a big one, because I was just thinking that we have 2 minutes right now just to wrap up. How can we deal with fears that are really, really paralyzing, emotionally,
So as I said, of course, there, like most people, I was afraid of presenting myself in front of people. I was afraid of public speaking. I was afraid of meeting new people. I was afraid of having a nice conversation or talking to especially people who are who have high standards than mine. That actually part came from my my self conversation that I had within me, which was that that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy enough. So acknowledge that you deserve to lead a great life. You deserve to lead a great life. I've acknowledged that. So, if you can acknowledge, see the greatness within you, then you will unlock the key, unlock the door to become all you are created to be. So, yeah, but you need to erase the self talk, the all the negative thoughts that you have given to yourself, that you have fed your mind, your brain with. So there were, of course, there were people who at first didn't believe in us. There were people who criticized us, but I what I think is those peoples actually also helped us to be what I am today. Those people not only showed me the wrong side of me, criticized me for for being who I was, but when I began to overcome each of those fears, what I began to do was those circumstances actually helped me to delve into the things, or to go toward places that I could never that I never imagined that was possible. So what I tell you is, what I my recommendation is to change the self, the self talk that you have within yourself. Change the transcript, change that script that you have written for yourself. So every time people tell you that you are not good enough, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not good enough. It also means you haven't taken all the effort to become good enough. So have you taken all your efforts? Have you taken, have you experimented with your life? Have you experimented with all the possibilities? If you haven't, go experiment with yourself. Take all the efforts and show others who you truly are.
As you're talking like this, I'm beginning to smile with the happy ending that you're putting into our faces. That our fears, or actually, let me put it like this: our will has got to be stronger than our fears, in such a way that we overcome judgment, whether it's coming from ourselves or coming from externally. And we need to make sure that we overcome these judgments and doubts, and we start building towards on the things that we desire. If it's presenting that you are going to be doing, focus on it, baby steps, focus on what you do the best. As a result, you gain self-confidence. You overcome fear with confidence, you see, because there got to be a replacement of fear with something, for fear not to exist at all. I'm really grateful for the presentation. You did well.